our family gathering, my niece read a DM I sent to my ex out loud as a joke. My husband then, I'm proof that the universe got jokes. You know how people get better when they are no longer with you? Well, that's my case. Hello, my name is Gina. I broke up with my ex as much as I loved him because he wasn't able to get his life together. He wouldn't get a job because he wanted to own his own business, but he couldn't start a business because he didn't have any money. He could barely feed himself, and he'd stay in bed all day, smoking or hanging out with his supplier, playing video games and smoking. And it wasn't like I didn't try. I kept telling him he needed to do something, anything, at least show a little effort. He'd nod and say he would, but nothing changed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and I was basically living with someone who had checked out of reality. I felt like I was carrying both of us, emotionally, financially, and mentally. I'd go to work, come back exhausted, and meet him exactly where I left him, on the same spot on the bed, the same ashtray, and the same controller in his hand. It got embarrassing, and not because of him, but because of how much I kept excusing it. People around me would ask, "How's he doing now?" And I'd lie and say, "He's getting there," knowing fully well he wasn't getting anywhere. I was scared to admit to myself that I was in love with someone who didn't even love himself enough to try. And loving someone who refuses to fight for their life feels like slowly drowning next to a person who won't even lift their head above water. He was a lovely, gentle guy, but I felt like he was dragging me back, so I dumped him. I didn't dump him because he hurt me or because he was a terrible person. The truth is, even though my ex was a mess, he wasn't a bad person. He was soft in the kind of way that made you want to protect him, and that softness was exactly why it hurt to leave him. But love alone doesn't build anything. I needed a partner, and he felt more like a responsibility. So I left him because every day with him felt like standing still. I cared about him, yes, but caring about someone who isn't moving forward with you eventually becomes heavy. It wears you down in ways you can't explain to anyone without sounding like the bad one. I needed to breathe, and I couldn't do that around someone who kept choosing comfort over progress. I started dating Washington, who was a more focused guy. He had a job, and he too was loving. When I met him, it felt like relief. You know, a man who woke up early, actually planned for his future, and talked about things like health insurance and savings and next year. A man who didn't need me to babysit him through life. Being with someone who already understood responsibility felt different in a good way. Washington didn't need convincing or reminders to try. He was simply consistent, and that was something I had been craving for the entire time with my ex. So it felt good to be with someone who wasn't draining me just by existing in my life. But then, my ex didn't stop texting me, not even after I'd got married to Wash. And the thing is, it wasn't flattering or exciting. It was actually tiring because it was like he was holding on to something that no longer existed, given the fact that I had already closed the door on it. His messages showed up at random times, and even though I didn't reply, the notifications alone were enough to annoy me. Wash noticed the texts, and I was never secretive with him about my ex, and he knew I never answered the messages. To me, telling my ex to stop would just be me finally answering him after all this while. I didn't want to give my ex even a second of false hope by responding. I didn't want to look like I was entertaining him. Also, I didn't want anything to escalate. Silence felt like the safest option because I didn't owe him another explanation. Because I have blocked him before, but he gets a new number to text me, so I was tired of doing that, or asking him to stay away from me and just ignored his texts. And I didn't want to keep having the same discussion with someone who clearly wasn't listening. Ignoring him felt easier than repeating the same sentence a sixth or seventh time. I was just exhausted. Anyways, sometime into our marriage, Wash came home with a present for me. It was completely wrapped, and when he gave it to me, I was confused and excited at the same time. The first thing I told him was that it wasn't my birthday. He laughed, telling me that he knew that, but I should just open it. I sat up and tore off the wrapping paper in like one breath. He just stood aside, smiling. He had gotten me a new phone, and the latest one at that. I sprang from my chair and hugged him so tightly. I was so happy about it. He was happy that I loved it as well. He then said I could put that old one away, and he gave me some money to go get a new card the next day. I knew he didn't want to ask me to change my phone number outright because he didn't want it to be a big deal. but this was his own gentle way of saying that I should cut my ex out of my life. And if there's anything I learned from my parents, it's that sacrifices must happen in marriages. Like how my mom never bought a cat no matter how she loved them because my dad was allergic. So I told myself that if my husband wasn't comfortable with me receiving constant messages from my ex, then I would cut the connection. And that's exactly what I did. I even asked him to drive me to the place in the morning, and I could see how happy it made him. With a new phone and a new SIM card, I put my old phone off and locked it away in a drawer with some old things. That was the last time I saw a message from my ex in like 2 years. My life went on without a glitch. I was happy, and I didn't feel like I was missing anything. That is, until a few months ago when I went to my friend's gender reveal party for her newborn baby. While I was there, I got to see a lot of my friends. There was a lot of gossiping, like I hadn't done in a long time. At one point, while I was in the living room, watching over the baby, my old friend Sarah snuck up on me. She said she'd been waiting to catch me alone. I found it very funny. She's a very funny girl. And I asked her why she wanted to find me alone, and she said she had the juiciest gossip for me. If she really thought she could top all the gossip I had received from all my friends in the past hour at that party, who was I to not let her try? So I just stood there and asked her to go on. She first asked me to guess who she found, and my answer was Jesus. We both laughed at my little joke, and she said I should guess for real. I told her I couldn't, and that made her shake her head in disappointment. She then told me she met Terry. I asked who Terry was. She laughed because she couldn't believe it. She first said that I had really moved on and forgotten about him. It was then that I got who she was talking about, my ex. But before I could say it, she called him the name all my friends used to call him back, Tiny Terry. I never liked the name, but that's what all my friends called him because he was thin and kind of petite. I smiled and told Sarah to stop calling him that. It was like I was back to when we were dating and I was always defending him. Sarah said I didn't need to tell her to stop calling him that because Tiny Terry wasn't so tiny anymore. My eyes were on the baby throughout most of our conversation, but when she said that, I quickly looked at her. What the hell did she mean by that? Had she seen him? How was he? All these questions ran through my mind, and I blurted them out. She chuckled and said that she ran into him at a bank 2 days ago. She said she walked past him because she didn't recognize him. He was the one that called her back by her name, and she really thought he was talking to somebody else named Sarah in the bank until he pointed at her. She said when he introduced himself, she literally screamed in the bank, and everyone looked at her. That was how shocked she was. She said he was freaking handsome, fit with muscles that could make a woman cut. Those are her words, not mine. And she said it was like he grew a few inches because he looked taller. I couldn't believe it was the same Terry that I dated that she was talking about. I mean, the guy didn't grow a single strand of hair on his face. His cheeks were as bald as the bum of the baby lying in front of me, and now Sarah was telling me that he had beards and a mustache. What was she on? I asked her if she was sure she didn't run into someone else because that didn't sound like the Terry I knew. And sure, I didn't expect him to still be the same guy I broke up with, but it was like she was describing a whole different person. I told her what she was describing was a character from a romance action movie, and she laughed and said what's exactly what he looked like. I just scoffed and said, if it's true, then good for him that he had gotten his life together. I tried to downplay my reaction. I wanted to ask if he asked about me and if they took a picture together, but I couldn't bring myself to ask any of those questions. I needed to act nonchalant so I would not give the idea that I was still interested in him, but those words stuck in my head. When I went home that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I needed something to get my mind off of all that, so I called my husband to ask if he was on his way home. He laughed and said he was just about to call me to tell me that he wouldn't be able to come home that night because he had a pile of work to burn through. We talked a little. He told me he loves me, and the call ended. I had dinner and tried to go to sleep, but I kept thinking about what Sarah said. I tried drawing a picture of what Terry looked like based on the description Sarah had given, but all that did was make my imaginations run wild. I don't even know if there is a name for the emotion I felt that night. All I knew was that I wanted to see Terry. I didn't care if it was a picture. I just needed to settle this urge to see him so badly. So I searched his name on Instagram, but I couldn't find an account on him. I didn't know what else to do to satisfy this feeling, so I just laid on the bed, looking up at the ceiling. And that was when I suddenly remembered my phone in the drawer. I sprang off the bed like I had springs attached to my legs. I quickly checked the drawer and moved some stuff out of the way. It took a minute, but I found it right there. It was in the pack my new phone came in when my husband bought it for me. I pulled it out immediately and tried to put it on, but it wasn't working. I plugged it to my charger, but it still didn't turn on. I Googled what could be wrong, and it said something about the phone losing charge because it was turned off for so long. I knew I had to repair the phone, but I wasn't going to be able to wait till the next morning. I might just die of unrest. So I took the phone and hurried out of the house. I took the car and went to a repair shop. Luckily, the guy said he'd be able to help me, and in about 30 minutes he was done with the repairs. I guess he changed the battery, I don't know. I just wanted the phone to come on, and it did. I let the phone charge a little bit before I took it home. Immediately, I connected the old phone to the Wi-Fi at home. So many messages were coming in, so I had to keep the phone on the bed for a few minutes while I walked around the room, waiting for 2 years' worth of messages to load. It felt like it was taking forever, so I even went to the kitchen to eat dinner. When I came back, the constant chirping of my notification sound had reduced, so I picked up the phone. I'm not kidding when I say that I had thousands of messages, at least 2,000. And over 70% of those 2,000 messages were from my ex, Terry. I was so scared to open his DM, because what could he possibly be sending that would be that much? I summoned courage and opened his DM, and I began scrolling through his messages. At first, they were the usual "I miss you" kind of messages, but soon the tone of the messages shifted. He would send me the picture of his job application, and then the acceptance email, a picture of himself on his first day at the office, when he first registered at the gym, when he got a new apartment, a new car, his fitness progress, his Employee of the Year award. It was like he was keeping me updated about his life, and it wasn't like he was showing off. It was more like he just wanted to share his story with me. He even told about his bad days, like when his boss shouted at him in front of everyone, and how embarrassed he felt. I was honestly lost in the story of his life. I didn't know when I read through over 1,500 messages from him, and by the time I was done, there were tears in my eyes. In his messages, he said it all felt incomplete without me, and that he understands why I left him because he was being a slacker back then, but he's ready now. His last message was from 3 days ago, and I couldn't understand or wrap my head around how he had been consistently texting me for 2 years. While I was feeling all emotional, I suddenly saw that he was typing. He sent me a message telling me about how he ran into my friend, Sarah, a few days ago, and said he was happy to see her, but wished he had run into me instead. I didn't know if I should answer or not. My hands were shaking and I was nervous, but I took a deep breath and just typed that I wish I ran into him too. Immediately, I sent the message. I held my breath and waited. Barely 5 seconds later, he called me. Video call. I first made sure I was decent. I arranged my hair, looked at my reflection on the mirror close to the bed, and practiced my smile before I answered. He looked more shocked than me when I found out how fast crocodiles could run. His mouth was open for a few moments after I answered, and when he finally spoke, he said he needed to be sure someone wasn't catfishing him. I awkwardly told him that no one was catfishing him, that it was really me. He screamed for joy. And my goodness, Sarah wasn't over-exaggerating. He looked freaking wonderful. He told me I looked even more beautiful than the last time he saw me, and I told him he looked nothing like the last time I saw him. We both blushed and laughed, and we talked for hours. He told about how he had been planning to start his own business on the side, and how much he had saved for it. I was so happy for him. He sounded so proactive, and I loved it. He made an inside joke, and we both laughed so hard at it that by the time we were done laughing, he said he missed me so much and would give anything to see me. I waited for like 2 seconds and said we should meet. He was so happy. He gave me a place and asked what day and time would be best for me. I answered, and he said it was a date. I chucked and told him that it wasn't, but deep down, I knew I wanted it to be because I prepared for it like one. We were to meet 2 days later, and when I got to the restaurant, he was waiting outside for me. The moment I saw him standing there, I felt a sudden rush of excitement. He looked so calm and confident, like someone who finally knew where he was going in life. I don't know why, but seeing him like that made my chest feel warm and strange. It didn't help that the first thing he did when he saw me was smile. This full, excited smile that made him look even better than how he looked on the video call. I mean, he was even more perfect in person. Everything about him was cleaner, better, and more intentional. And he smelled wonderful, not like weed or looked like one. It was this warm, fresh scent that made me want to stand a little closer to him without looking obvious. I kept pretending to fix my bag or adjust my sleeve just so I could catch another whiff of it. Although I didn't say anything, I noticed everything. We ate out, talked, caught up, and he told me he didn't think I was using that number anymore. So he was just using my DM as an offload center, where he came to talk to an imaginary someone about his life. The way he said it made me pause because he sounded so honest. Like he wasn't expecting me to feel anything about it, and he just wanted to tell me what had been going on with him. And that somehow made everything even more real and genuine. He invited me to his friend's art gallery opening a few days later, and I went. I didn't even hesitate, but I concealed my excitement and eagerness. I acted like I was just going to check it out, but inside I knew I wanted to see him again. I wanted to see how he looked in a different setting, how he moved, how he talked to people who weren't me. When I walked in and saw him standing in front of a painting while talking to an acquaintance, I felt a tingle in my underwear. There was this aura I can't explain that pulled me to him, like some quiet energy that made the whole room fade out for a second. Then, after that day, we talked a lot on the phone, and it got spicy sometimes. It's not like we intended for things to go that way, but one conversation blended into another, until the tone shifted, and we found ourselves saying things we probably shouldn't say, but didn't stop saying anyway. Then one day, after work, he picked me up in front of my workplace in his car. We stopped by a park to take a walk, and we held hands while we walked. The touch of his hand was enough to make my chest tighten and sent shivers down my spine, and it just made everything carry more weight than it should. That generated enough electricity between that set everything aflame when we looked at each other. We kissed so passionately, long and hard, holding on like we didn't want to let go. Due to the overwhelming emotions at the moment, we hurried back to his car and had sex right in there. It was fast, intense, and left me shaking when it was over. The thrill of being in such a private space, in public but hidden, made it even more exciting. After that, it was more sneaking around, more sexy chats, and so on. And every time we met, we kept doing the same thing, and whenever we were not together, I kept thinking about him all the time. I just couldn't stop. I was talking with him on my old phone, so it was always silent and out of sight. That made it easier to keep things private. I would check it constantly, waiting for him to message, thinking about what he might say next, and feeling the tension build even when we weren't together. I wished I had kept things that way, in the old phone, but I started talking with Terry more and more, even when I wasn't at home. So I had to give him my new number, and I decided to put my old phone away so my husband wouldn't suspect anything, especially since sometimes I had to be away from home or hang out with my husband as he wanted to spend more time with me. I couldn't risk carrying my phone around. I was careful to the point that I always texted Terry ahead whenever I was going to be with my husband so he wouldn't text me then. I was overly careful with everything. I even sneaked away during date nights with my husband to the bedroom to text Terry and masturbate, and everything was fun and thrilling for me at the time. That was, until the family gathering my parents held. We were planning my grandfather's birthday. My mom wanted to surprise him. I woke up that morning feeling strange. I even broke my plates before we left. I should have seen that as a sign that something bad was about to happen. Even while we got there and I was helping my mom pack the food trays, I kept wiping my hands on my clothes because they were sweaty. I didn't know why. I kept telling myself to stop overthinking, that it was a normal family day. But the heaviness wouldn't leave. That's when I grabbed my bag, secretly took out my phone and texted Terry, because I felt like being with him would have eased the feeling, and chatting with him would have at least made me feel a little bit better. But he didn't reply, so I just put my phone back in my bag. I had dropped my bag on the couch to help my sisters with some things, and when we came back in, I didn't check my bag. I had been helping my sister arrange the birthday decorations, unpacking plates, stacking napkins, and moving balloons into place. My nieces and nephews were running all over the house, and I was trying to keep track of them, while thinking about what else needed to be done, so I wasn't paying attention to my bag or anything else. Although we were almost done with everything and almost everyone was already seated in place. And that was when we all heard them arguing about pronunciation. I just laughed, while also waiting to hear what they were saying. My niece then read the whole sentence correctly. "I miss you so much, and I can't wait to have you. How about anal this time? I kinda miss it." Everyone turned to the children with bewilderment in their eyes, but she was just smiling. I guess she thought we were impressed by her reading skills. She didn't seem to notice anything wrong or realize what she just said, and she kept giggling as she held the phone. The way she held the phone and her little fingers gripped it tightly made it clear she was proud of herself, so she continued reading and laughing. "I would suck you like a lollipop if you were with me right now." I felt my stomach drop and my heart skip. My mouth went dry and I couldn't even think about moving. She then went on to say that she liked lollipops. My hands went cold. I couldn't breathe right for a second. My mind was racing, thinking about what would happen if my husband saw the screen or recognized the phone. But I felt a bit relieved since I was not the only one using the same model. Everyone basically shouted at her, and out of fright she dropped the phone she was reading from. The sound of it hitting the floor made my chest jump. That was when I actually saw the words I texted my ex on the screen, glaring at me like a spotlight. I couldn't believe what was happening. My hands itched, wanting to grab it and quickly hide it so everything could disappear before anyone else saw it too. My thought was, if I picked it up, I could just pretend it was just random stuff she saw and read on social media, covering my tracks. But before I could actually do that, her mother quickly picked up the phone and asked who owns it. I felt my throat tighten. My mind was racing 100 miles an hour, thinking about what would happen if anyone realized it was mine. I couldn't even claim it as mine. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes and the sudden silence that followed after the shouting. The energy in the room had shifted from chaos to tension in a heartbeat. And I felt so exposed, even without them knowing, yet I was the owner of the phone. Everyone claims it wasn't theirs, but I couldn't say a word. It was as if the words were stuck in my throat. So my sister asked me, "How about me? Why do I look nervous? And if the phone is mine since I haven't said anything?" I laughed awkwardly and said it's because it's not mine, so I had nothing to say. Then my sister said since no one owns this phone, did it just fly down here on itself after sending such messages? And who the hell is Terry? She didn't know my ex's name. I never let my family know Terry when we were dating because I wasn't ready to be torn apart by them, given how he was then. I just chuckled and asked to see the phone, so I could quickly find a way to end it. But then my husband stood up and got the phone from my sister. He read the messages from earlier again, the ones I sent to Terry, and everyone was wondering why he did that. Then he scrolled through our previous messages, shaking his head, and after a minute he threw the phone on the floor, and it scared everyone. The screen was damaged but still usable. Just then my mom, who was busy in the kitchen when everything happened, walked in, ignorant of what was going on, and said that my grandfather was almost here so everyone should get ready. But then suddenly she noticed the tension when everyone was struggling to speak freely. She asked what was going on, but then my husband said to her that he thinks I have a confession to make. And then he turned and said to me, "You can give someone a new life, but you can't rewrite who they are." Then he added that I should make sure I never come home to him again, but return to Terry because we were done. And then he apologized to my mom that he couldn't be here for the party anymore and walked away. I ran after him, apologizing, crying, but he didn't even spare me his time. He entered his car and drove away angrily. When I turned, I saw everyone outside asking what happened. I broke down crying. I couldn't say a word, but one of my sisters said it's obvious I cheated on my husband with a guy named Terry. Hearing her say it out loud made my chest hurt even more. My mom started scolding me immediately because just a minute later, my grandfather arrived, but we couldn't execute the surprise in the way we wanted given the heat of the moment. Everything we planned felt useless now. Everyone looked confused and uncomfortable, and the tension in the air was just too much. Although my grandfather was still grateful, the mood of the party wasn't what I intended for me, and I think everyone low-key kind of blamed me for ruining everything. I couldn't even look at anyone again, so I just went to my old room and cried myself out. My hands were shaking as I tried reaching out to my husband, but then that's when I realized he had blocked me. My calls didn't ring, and my texts didn't deliver. It felt like someone pulled the floor from under me. My mom walked in a few minutes later and started bullying me into telling her exactly what happened. I had to confess because I didn't have anywhere else to go just in case my husband refused to let me in. I told her everything, crying while talking, but she didn't soften even one bit. Then she asked me to get out of her sight and house. She said she didn't want to see me anymore because I was a homewrecker, and no daughter of hers is a homewrecker. That I ruined my home with my own hand, and she will never forgive me for the shame I brought on the family. Hearing her say those words to me broke me completely. I was so hurt and ran out crying, and when I got home, the locks had been changed. All my belongings were sitting outside, my clothes, my bags, everything. I stood frozen there, staring at them because I didn't want to believe it was real. I didn't even want to accept that my marriage was truly over. After I banged the door asking my husband to open, calling his name over and over, but there was no response. It looked like there was no sign of him either. The whole place felt empty. So I just sat there, dropped on the floor, crying and crying. I didn't even know how long I sat there. I just know my throat was hurting from crying too much, and my neighbors were looking at me with contempt. But as much as I was feeling ashamed, I didn't mind as long as my husband saw my efforts. It was almost midnight, still no signs of my husband, and I had nowhere else to go. That's when my mind drifted to Terry. I realized he hadn't responded to my messages yet, and he was my last hope as I needed a place to crash. I didn't want to call him, but I had no choice. When I called him, he wasn't picking. I tried again, still nothing. Then his number wasn't even going through anymore. That was strange, superly strange. I didn't even know what to do next. I felt weak and stupid. I called one of my sisters and begged her to let me stay with her for the night. She said there was no problem, that I could come as long as I left the next morning because she didn't want to inconvenience her family. That made my chest tighten more. When I got to her house, she opened the door halfway like she was scared to let me in fully. She made space on the couch for me. She didn't even let me use the guest room. And she didn't touch me or hug me. She just said I could stay till morning. Her husband barely looked at me. I cried quietly so they wouldn't hear, but my chest was hurting so much I had to bite my pillow. I feel like a reject, like no one wants me anymore. Not even the man I wanted to build my life with. Not even the one I gave away my perfect life for. I'm feeling all conflicted and broken. The universe sure did this one because why did my ex, who never seemed to amount to anything good, suddenly get better? It feels like they're mocking me or something. When I needed him to act right, build a future with me, he was scattered, useless, and dragging me down. But now, when I had finally moved on and was living a happy life, he suddenly became the best version of himself as if he auditioned for a new life. It's almost funny in a painful way. If he had never gotten better and shown up in my life through Sarah, he and I would never have had business with each other again, and this just feels cruel. I wish Terry never ran into Sarah, and I wish Sarah kept her mouth shut. I'm scared of losing everything. I'm so scared of starting over again. I just can't do it anymore. Update. I kept wondering what took my niece to my bag, and why my phone would be the center of her trying to show off her reading skills, because if that didn't happen, I would have been able to keep things under control, not now that my life is shattered. I understand that Wash wasn't a bad man, and he didn't deserve any of this. But I am not a bad person either. It's just that my actions were bad. I keep thinking about the words he said to me. The words hurt me so much. I can't believe he believes cheating is my nature. I have never cheated. This is the first time I have done something this terrible, and I was ready to make amends, but he never gave me the chance. Wash thinks I'm the devil, and since he threw me out, I have been moving from one place to the other. I don't really have a stable place to settle yet. A week later, I returned to my husband and pleaded with him to give me a second chance, but I failed at that. He didn't change his mind. The thing is, Wash has filed for divorce, so I'm sadly divorced, a very unhappy woman at this point. And to top things off, Terry's number is still not going through. He can't be reached, and he hasn't texted or called back. I'm just in the dark, hoping for light someday. I feel stupid and used every second of my life, but I have learnt, and I regret never letting my past stay buried.